One of them is, first of all, as I mentioned earlier, AON is a global company. So you need a platform which allows the company and allows all the officers in all the countries to operate together as a global company. And the solution we had at the time didn't allow us to do that. So which means you had options. You had options of working on the existing solution, try to see how you can upgrade that to different versions or whatever, to see if you can sort of allow all of us to collaborate and cooperate as a global company. Or you can just say, okay, let's forget about it. Have a blank piece of paper and see what we can do. So I think AON kind of went for, I wouldn't say completely blank piece of paper, but they've decided not to be restricted by what we have, rather than, okay, what do we want to go, AON as a company? And because this is where we want to go, what solutions are around allow us to take us. And then another driver, which of course, and you have to quote that, just otherwise you know before you can get any new idea approved in the board, you have to prove that there's some sort of cost saving. And if we look across the board if you look at AON across the board, right, there's bound to be savings, because at the time we're looking at this solution, we found that different countries or different stage of, I would think, different stage of, and of course, with any new solution, right, before you can get approved by the board, you have to show that there's some sort of cost incentive. And if you look carefully, there is indeed cost incentive of going for cloud solution, because at the time I mentioned that we have options of upgrading different regions or different countries or different offices up to the standard we want. And if you look at it across the board, right, we have countries and offices where the software a few versions out, the hardware is pretty old, and to upgrade all of that, there's significant sort of amount of investment to do that. So whereas if you just subscribe to the cloud, then you pay a certain fee, you have a number of users, you pay a certain fee. So we look at across the board, there's definitely savings. And if you ask me my experience, right, it's not about saving as in, okay, let's calculate how much it costs. It's much more easy to track how much are we paying per service. Because the good thing about cloud solution is you kind of pay per user, per service, per month. And it's easy to say we have 50,000 staff. Then it's easy to work out, okay, for that service, say messaging service, it's costing AON that much. And for maybe document sharing service, costing that much. For instant messaging, it's costing that much. It's just extremely easy to measure how much the company is actually investing in a particular technology platform. Whereas in the old solution, it's all bundled in one, or some servers do common, some servers have common applications there, and it's just hard to work out the depreciation, hard to work out the license costs, where this is very simple financing. I definitely go for the simplicity of finance. As you can imagine, if you look at vendors, right, some of the vendors are quite sophisticated. And sophisticated in terms of they've been in the market for a long time, they're big names. But they might not be that advanced at the time in the technology we're looking at. I mean, I guess I'm trying, without naming the vendor, that there are vendors who offer a lot of the free email, free instant messaging, all of those services online, but they weren't one of the, long-term vendors. So it's actual competition between the vendors who's got into the home market, but they might not be as well known, might not as established, versus the very established vendors who have the money, the financial backing, but then who are trying to play the catch-up game. So as a company, you have to strike a balance, because you want to go for the more established one, because they're going to be around. They have a whole network of services, staff and all that to provide the service, but you're not sure how advanced they are in the technology. But if you go for the newer ones, right, you know that they've been doing it for the last 10 years. But then their whole organizational framework, their servicing network might not be as good as the other one. So what I mean is, if you look at it right, we look at all of them. And of course, we eventually settle on a vendor which is pretty established. But I think they've done very well in terms of, I think they've caught up a lot in terms of the technology, even though they might have started a bit later than those one who got into the home market. So I still think we picked a very good vendor. I have to say there are a lot of challenges. The challenge actually mainly come from user acceptance. And I mean, user acceptance is, I think, as you probably know, people don't like changes. They naturally are very suspicious of changes in terms of, okay, what does that mean for me? And from a user perspective, what they really care, right? Am I going to be better off? I mean, ignoring what the companies say, they actually don't really care. The general average user don't really care what the vendor is, what the version is. They don't really care. But what they care is, am I going to be better off? In terms of, okay, is the migration going to be painful at the actual migration? Would it be as painless as possible? And okay, once I've gone through the migration, am I going to be better off in terms of, am I going to be more productive? Am I going to get more functionality, but then it's easy to use? From a management perspective, in terms of country management, so this is a global solution. We have to sell it to the country because there's a cost involved. And I mean cost involved is, again, a lot of country management looked at what they spend on a certain service, but it was very hard to sort of isolate, okay, we're spending that much for messaging, we're spending that much for what, because it's all bundled in one big IT expenditure. Whereas now they're clearly being hit, okay, for your number of staff, you're paying that much for this service. And interestingly, right, this is sort of human psychology. When it was all muddled, people weren't sure. It could well be a bigger amount. It doesn't stand out as much, but once you give them a very clear number, okay, this is how much you have to pay for this service, it suddenly stand out because it's not part of the IT expenditure, it's another one. So we have to kind of convince the management that that cost will substitute and will yield savings in another part of the IT expenditure. So that's another thing we have to go through. And then lastly, I think another thing is also IT, from the IT staff, because I think IT staff are the one, they're kind of at the forefront of having to support the users, having to tell them, having to bring them from one platform to another platform. There's a lot of workload involved. But we have another complication, and which is something I'm dealing with. And that is because AON is like, we have a lot of companies and we have some joint ventures. And when it comes to JV, it's the hardest in terms of JV, in terms of, this is very much an AON initiative. And if you have a joint venture where AON is now partnering with another vendor, they kind of feel that they lost control. They like the fact that, okay, I'm part of the JV and the servers are here. If I want anything, the servers are there, I can get my email, I can get my files. Whereas they kind of feel a bit lost control. Now we subscribe to an outside solution, and that solution might be a contract between AON and the external vendor. Another challenge, which I think you must have heard of it from I'm sure a lot of my counterparts in other companies, and that is, okay, can data be resided outside the country? A lot of people think a cloud solution is outside the country, and again, you have to go through the legal bit, and we do have like compliance officers and legal people to look at local laws to make sure that the cloud solution doesn't violate any of the local regulation. And interestingly, this is having gone through it and having sort of gone through some of the countries, it's actually quite rare for a country to say, okay, you're not allowed to put your data outside. If you look through it carefully, what we found is it's very rare for country government laws to go down to that level to actually stop you from doing that. But then you have to look at it comprehensively to make sure that you cover all grounds and the solution doesn't breach any local laws.